Okay, if you've ever worked on a major project, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's that sinking feeling you get when you try to import a schedule from a subcontractor and it just falls apart, right? Trying to get Primavera P6, Microsoft Project, and Excel to play nice together can feel like this constant uphill battle. But what if the problem isn't the tools, but the fact that we're forcing them to fight in the first place? Today, we're going to dig into why this happens and explore a much smarter way to manage the chaos.
So here's our game plan. We'll kick things off by really understanding the problem, the software mismatch that's on pretty much every project these days. Then, we're going to bust a very common myth, the idea of standardization. From there, we'll look at the tough spot this puts subcontractors in. Before we get to the good stuff, a more balanced approach that leads to planning that's not just smarter, but a whole lot fairer for everyone.
I mean, the answer for most of us is a huge yes. This feeling of just trying to jam things together that don't fit, it's a frustration every project controls person knows. It's that moment you look at the data you just imported and it looks nothing like what you started with. It's a super common problem, but believe me, it doesn't have to be a project killer. All right, let's dive into our first section, the software mismatch. And here's the thing you've got to get your head around. On modern projects, especially in construction and mining, using a mix of different planning software isn't some kind of failure. It is the absolute 100% norm.
This mess is actually pretty normal. You know, you've got the project owners and they need a heavy hitter like P6 for governance and control. The main contractor then uses that to run the master schedule. But the subcontractors doing the actual work, well, they're often using MS Project or even just Excel because it's what fits their workflow. It's what their team already knows how to use. And the key thing here is that every one of those choices is totally valid for that specific company.
So this complexity naturally leads people to the next big idea, which is what I call the myth of standardization. You know, the knee-jerk reaction to all this chaos is to just throw your hands up and say, that's it. Everyone on this project will use this one piece of software. End of story. But as we're about to see, that's a really flawed way of thinking, and it often does more harm than good.
And here it is, the disconnect in a nutshell. The dream is this beautiful, clean world where one platform just solves everything for everybody. But the reality? A project is a living, breathing ecosystem of different companies, and they all have their own systems and processes. Forcing a single tool on everyone just completely ignores that fundamental truth, and it ends up creating way more problems than it solves.
And this is so crucial. You can't just hit export in one program and import in another and expect it to work. It just doesn't. All of a sudden, your activity ID structures are a mess, critical cost and resource data just vanishes into thin air, the calendars don't line up, you can even completely break the coding structures your own team needs for reporting. What this means is that every single time you transfer a file, it requires a person to sit down and manually painstakingly check and clean everything. And that manual work has a very real cost. Which brings us right to the subcontractor's dilemma. Because this isn't just some abstract technical problem. It's a human one, and it's a financial one, especially for the smaller companies on a project. Just look at that number, $3,000, maybe more. Now, for a giant corporation, that's a rounding error, right? But for a small subcontractor who's just on the job for a few months, that cost could literally be more than their entire profit margin. It's a huge financial burden to place on them. And it's not even just about the license fee. Think about it. They have to pull their people off of productive work to get them trained on some complicated new system that they might only use for this one job. And so often, this cost isn't even mentioned in their contract. It's just something they're expected to suck up and pay for. I absolutely love this phrase because it just nails the unfairness of the situation. When the contract doesn't actually cover the cost of the software or the time for training, it's not a real requirement anymore, is it? It's an unfunded expectation. It's an unrealistic, unfair demand that you're placing on your project partner.
So, if forcing everyone onto one standard platform doesn't work, what's the answer? Well, this is where we get to a more balanced, more practical approach. It's a framework that's built for how projects actually work in the real world, based on collaboration, not on impossible control.
The core idea here is really simple, but it's incredibly powerful. It all starts with a change in language, a change in mindset. The main contractor's tool, let's say P6, is no longer mandatory. It's simply the preferred platform for the master schedule. That one tiny word change, from mandatory to preferred, opens up a whole world of flexibility, but without giving up control. So here's how it plays out. The main contractor, they still own and maintain the master schedule in their system of choice. No change there.
The subcontractor, they provide their updates in whatever format works best for them. MS Project, Excel, you name it, as long as the data is sound. And here's the crucial part. The responsibility shifts. The main contractor's expert planning team is now responsible for integrating those updates and making sure the quality of the master schedule is always protected.
So what's the result of all this? What happens when you work this way? Let's talk about the benefits of this new model, which I really think of as smarter, fairer planning.
The benefits here are just so clear. First, the master schedule's integrity is totally protected because your expert planning team is the gatekeeper for all inputs. Second, you get rid of that unfair financial weight on your smaller partners, which builds trust and better relationships. Third, you're letting everyone work with the tools they know best, which means better, more effective collaboration. And finally, you don't actually lose any control, you just put that control in the right hands.
So here it is, the big mindset shift that I want to leave you with. Software interoperability, it isn't some problem that you can solve one time and be done with it. It is a permanent reality of modern projects, and it's something that has to be actively and intelligently managed with a disciplined, smart workflow.
And that brings us to the final question I want you to think about. I want you to take a hard look at your own project workflows. Are they designed to enforce rigid control no matter the cost? Or are they actually designed to foster genuine, practical collaboration? The answer to that question could make all the difference on your next project.